Hello everyone. Thanks to all of you who took the time to watch this video. Hopefully, the majority of you will stick around for the continuation of this series. To start things off, let me introduce myself. I'm a guy who works at a horror movie studio. My job here is simply to read unproduced screenplays. I read through the first 10 pages of a script, and if I like what I read, I pass it on to the higher-ups. If I'm being perfectly honest, I'm really just a glorified assistant. And although my daily duties consist of bringing people coffee, taking and making calls and passing on messages, my only pleasure with this job is reading crappy horror movie scripts so my asshole of a boss doesn't have to. I'm actually a screenwriter by trade, which is why I took this job. I figured taking a job like this was a good way to get my own scripts read and potentially produced. Sadly, I haven't passed on a single script of mine without it being handed back with the comment, "The story needs work." I guess my own horror movie scripts are just as crappy as the ones I'm paid to read. Well, coming into work one morning, feeling rather depressed by another rejection, I sat down at my desk, read through one terrible screenplay before moving on to another. With the majority of screenplays I read, I barely make it past the first 5 pages. But then I moved on to the next screenplay in the pile. From the offset, I knew the script had a bunch of flaws. The story was way too long and the writing way too descriptive. You see, the trick with screenwriting is to write your script in as few words as possible, so producers can read as much of the story before determining if it was perspective or not. However, the writing and premise of the script was intriguing enough that I wanted to keep reading. And so, I brought the script home with me. Although I knew the script would never be produced, or at least by this studio, I continued reading with every page. I kept reading until the protagonist was finally introduced, 10 pages in, and to my absolute surprise, the name I read in big, bold capital letters was a name I recognized. The name I recognized read, Henry Cartwright, early 20s, Caucasian, brown hair, blue eyes. You see, the reason I recognized this name, along with the following character description, was because it belonged to my former childhood best friend. This obviously had to be some coincidence, right? But not only did this fictional character have my old friend's name and physical description, but like my friend and myself, he was also an Englishman from North London. The writer's name on the script's front page was not Henry. For legal reasons, I can't share the writer's name, but it was plainly obvious to me that the guy who wrote this script had based his protagonist off my best friend from childhood. Calling myself intrigued, I then did some research on Henry online, just to see what he was up to these days, and if he had any personal relation to the writer of the script. What I found, however, written in multiple headlines of mainstream news websites, underneath recent photos of Henry's now grown-up face, was an incredible and terrifying story. The story I read in the news was the very same story I was now reading through the pages of this script. Holy shit, I thought. Not only had something truly horrific happened to my friend Henry, but someone had then made a horror movie script out of it. So, when I said this script was the exact same story as the one in the news, that wasn't entirely true. In order to explain what I mean by this, let me first summarize Henry's story. According to the different news websites, Henry had accompanied a group of American activists on an expedition into the Congo Rainforest. Apparently, these activists wanted to establish their own commune deep inside the jungle. FYI, their reason for this, as well as their choice of location, is pretty ludicrous. Don't worry, you'll soon see. But once they get into the jungle, they were then harassed by a group of local men who tried abducting them. Well, like a real-life horror movie, Henry and the Americans managed to escape, running as far away as they could through the jungle. But once they escaped into the jungle, some of the Americans got lost, and they either starved to death or died from some third-world disease. It's a rather tragic story, but only Henry and 2 other activists managed to survive before finding their way out of the jungle and back to civilization. although the screenplay accurately depicts this tragic adventure story in the beginning. When the abduction sequence happens, that's when the story starts to drastically differ, or at least, that's when the screenplay starts to differ from the news version of events. You see, after I found Henry's story in the news, I then did some more online searching. And what I found was that Henry had shared his own version of the story. In Henry's own eyewitness account, everything that happens after the attempted abduction differs rather unbelievably to what the news had claimed, and if what Henry himself tells after this point is true, then holy mother of fucking hell. This now brings me on to the next thing. Although the screenplay's first half matches with the news version of the story, the second half of the script matches only and perfectly with the story as told by Henry himself. I had no idea which version was true, the news, because they're always reliable, right? Or Henry's supposed eyewitness account. Well, for some reason, I wanted to get to the bottom of this, perhaps due to my past relation to Henry. And so, I got in contact with the screenwriter whose phone number and address were on the front page of the script. Once I got in contact with the writer, where we then met over a cup of coffee, although he did admit he used the news story in Henry's own account as resources. The majority of what he wrote came directly from Henry himself. Like me, the screenwriter was greatly intrigued by Henry's story. Well, once he finally managed to track Henry down, not only did Henry tell the screenwriter what really happened to him in the jungle, but he also gave permission for the writer to adapt his story into a feature screenplay. Apparently, when Henry and the two other survivors escaped from the jungle, because of how unbelievable their story would sound, they decided to tell the world a different and more plausible ending. It was only a couple of years later, and plagued by terrible guilt, did Henry try and tell the world the horrible truth. Even though Henry's own version of what happened is out there, he knew if his story was adapted into a movie picture, potentially watched by millions, then more people would know to stay as far away from the Congo Rainforest as humanly possible. Well, now we know Henry's motive for sharing this story with the world, and now, here is mine. In these series of posts, I'm going to share with you this very same screenplay, with the writers and Henry's blessing, of course, to warn as many of you as possible about the supposed evil that lurks deep inside the Congo Rainforest. If you're now thinking, why shouldn't I just wait for the movie to come out? Well, I've got some bad news for you. Not only does the screenplay need work, but the horrific events in this script could never ever be portrayed in any feature film, horror or otherwise. Well, I think we're just about ready to dive into this thing. But before we get started here, let me lay down how this is going to go. Through the reading of the script, I'll eventually jump in to clarify some things like context, what is faithful to the true story or what was changed for film purposes. I should also mention I will be omitting some of the early scenes. Don't worry, not any of the good stuff. Just one or two build-up scenes that have some overly cringe dialogue. Another thing I should mention is the original script had some fairly offensive language thrown around. But in case you're someone who's easily offended, not to worry, I have removed any and all offensive words, well, most of them. If you also happen to be someone who has never read a screenplay before, don't worry either, it's pretty simple stuff. Just think of it as reading a rather straightforward novel. But if you do come across something in the script you don't understand, let me know in the comments and I'll happily clarify it for you. To finish things off here, let me now set the tone for what you can expect from this story. This screenplay can be summarized as Apocalypse Now meets Jordan Peele's Get Out, meets Danny Boyle's The Beach meets Eli Roth's The Green Inferno, meets Wes Craven's The Serpent and the Rainbow. Well, I think that's enough stalling from me. Let's begin with the show logline. A young Londoner accompanies his girlfriend's activist group on a journey into the heart of African jungle, only to discover they now must resist the very evil humanity vowed to leave behind. XT. Black void, beginning of time. We stare into a dark nothingness. A black empty canvas on the screen. We can almost hear a wailing somewhere in its vast space. Ghostly howls. Barely even heard. We stay in this emptiness for 10 seconds, Fade in. Going up that river was like traveling back to the earliest beginnings of the world, when vegetation rioted on the earth and the big trees were kings. Heart of Darkness Fade to XE. Jungle, Central Africa, Neolithic Age. Day, the ominous words fade away, transitioning us from an endless dark void into a seemingly endless green primal environment. Vegetation rules everywhere. From vines and snake-like branches of the immense trees to thin, spike-ended leaves covering every inch of ground and space. The interior to this jungle is dim. Light struggles to seep through holes in the treetops, whose prehistoric trunks have swelled to an immense size. We can practically feel the jungle breathing life. Hear it too, animal life. Birds chanting and monkeys howling off-screen. On the floor surface, insect life thrives among dead leaves, dead wood and dirt, until footsteps. One pair of human feet stride into frame and then out, and another pair, then out again, followed by another, all walking in a singular line. These feet belong to 3 prehistoric hunters. Thin in stature and small, very small, in fact. Barely clothed aside from rags around their waists, carrying a wooden spear each. Their dark skin gleams with sweat from the humid air. The middle hunter is different, somewhat feminine. Unlike the other 2, he possesses tribal markings all over his face and body, with small bone piercings through the ears and lower lip. He looks almost to be a kind of shaman, a seer, a woot. The hunters walk among the trees. Brief communication is heard in their ancient language, no subtitles, until the middle hunter, the woot, sees something ahead, holds the 2 back. We see nothing. The back hunter, Kemba, then gets his throwing arm ready. Taking 2 steps forward, he then lobs his spear nearly 20 yards ahead. Landing shaft protrudes from the ground. They run over to it. Kemba plucks out his spear, lifts the head to reveal a dark green lizard, swaying its legs in its dying moments. The hunters study it, then laugh hysterically. Except the woot. XT. Jungle evening. The hunters continue to roam the forest at a faster pace. The shades of green around them dusk ever darker. Later, they now squeeze their way through the interior of a thick bush. The second hunter, Banuk, scratches himself and wails. The woot looks around this mouth-like structure, concerned, as if they're to be swallowed whole at any moment. EXT. Jungle continuos. They ascend out the other side, brush off any leaves or scrapes, and move on. The 2 hunters look back to see the woot has stopped. Kemba, subtitles to woot. What is wrong? The woot looks around, again concernedly at the scenery. Noticeably different. A darker, sinister green. The trees feel more claustrophobic. There's no sound. Animal and insect life has died away. WOT subtitles. We should go back. It is getting dark. Both hunters agree, turn back. As does the woot. We see the whites of his eyes widen, searching around desperately. Cut TO. The woot's POV. The supposed bush, from which they came, has vanished. Instead, a dark continuation of the jungle. The 2 hunters notice this too. Kemba, worrisomely, where's the bush? Banuk points his spear to where the bush should be. Banuk, it was there. We went through and now it has gone. As Kemba and Banuk argue, words away from becoming violent, the woot in front of them is stone solid. Knows, feels something's deeply wrong. XT. Jungle day. Days later, the hunters continue to trek through the same jungle. Hunched over, spears drag on the ground, visibly fatigued from days of non-stop movement, unable to find a way back. Trees and scenery around all appear the same, as if they've been walking in circles. If anything, moving further away from the bush. Kemba and Banuk begin to stagger, cling to the trees and each other for support. The Woot, clearly struggles the most, begins to lose his bearings, before suddenly, he crashes down on his front, face down into dirt. The Woot slowly rises, unaware that inches ahead he's reached some sort of clearing. Kemba and Banuk, now caught up, stop where this clearing begins. On the ground, the Woot sees them look ahead at something. He now faces forward to see. The clearing is an almost perfect circle. Vegetation around the edges. Still in the jungle, and in the center planted upright, lies a long stump of a solitary dead tree. Darker in color. A different kind of wood. It's also weathered like the remains of a forest fire. A stone-marked pathway has also been dug, leading to it. However, what's strikingly different is the tree, almost 3 times longer than the hunters, has a face carved on the very top. The face, dark, with a distinctive human nose, bulges for eyes, horizontal slit for a mouth, sits like a severed, impaled head. The hunters peer up at the face's haunting, stone-like expression. Horrified, except the Woot appears to have come to a spiritual awakening of some kind. The Woot begins to drag his tired feet towards the dead tree, with little caution or concern bewitched by the face. Kemba tries to stop him, but is aggressively shrugged off. On the pathway, the Woot continues to the tree. His eyes have not left the face. The tall stump arches down on him. The sun behind it gives the impression this is some kind of god. Rays of light move around it, creates a shade that engulfs the Woot, the god swallowing him whole. Now closer, the Woot anticipates touching what seems to be a red human hand-shaped print branded on the bark, fingers inches away before. A high-pitched growl races out from the jungle, right at the Woot, crashes down, attacking him. Canines sink into flesh. The Woot cries out in horrific pain. The hunters react. They spear the wild beast on top of him. Stab repetitively. Stain what we see only as blurred orange/brown fur. Red. The beast cries out, yet still eager to take the Woot's life. The stabbing continues, until the beast can't take any more. Falls to one side, finally off the Woot. The hunters go round to continue the killing. Continue stabbing. Grunt as they do it, blood sprays on them, until finally realizing the beast has fallen silent. Still with death. The beast's face. Dead brown eyes stare into nothing. As Kemba and Banuk stare down to see. This beast is now a primate. Something about it is familiar. Its skin. Its shape. Hands and feet. And especially its face, is almost human. Kemba and Banuk are stunned, clueless to if this thing is ape or man or animal. Forget the Woot is mortally wounded. His moans regain their attention. They kneel down to him, see as the blood oozes around his eyes and mouth, and the gaping bite mark shredded into his shoulder. The Woot turns up to the circular sky. Mumbles unfamiliar words, seems to cling onto life, one breath at a time. Kutio, a chameleon in the trees, camouflaged as dark as the jungle, watches over this from a high branch. XT. Jungle clearing. Night. Kemba and Banuk sit around a primitive fire, stare motionless into the flames, mentally defeated in a captivity they can't escape. Thunder is now heard, high in the distance, yet deep and foreboding. The Woot, laid out on the clearing floor, mummified in big leaves for warmth. Unconscious, sucks air in like a dying mammal. Then, the Woot erupts into wakening, coincides with the drumming thunder, eyes wide open, breathes now at a faster and more panicked pace. The hunters startle to their knees as the thunder produces a momentary white flash of lightning. The Woot's mouth begins to make words. mumbled at first, but then, "Wot, horror, the horror, the horror." Thunder and lightning continue to drum closer. The hunters panic, yell at each other, and the woots onteed horror, 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 horror. Kemba screams at the woot to stop, shakes him, as if forgotten he's already awake. Woots onteed horror, horror, horror. Banuk tries to pull Kemba back. Lightning exposes their actions. Banuk, leave him. Kemba, evil has taken him. Woot, horror, horror, horror. Kemba now races to his spear, before stands back over the woot on the ground. Lifts the spear, ready to skewer the woot into silence. When thunder clamors as a white light flashes the whole clearing, exposes Kemba, spear overhead. Kemba stiffens. The flash vanishes. Kemba looks down, to see the end of another spear protrudes from his chest. His spear falls through his fingers. Now clutches the one inside him. As the woot continues, "Wot, horror, horror." Kemba falls to one side as a white light flashes again, reveals Banuk behind him, wide-eyed in disbelief. The woot's rantings have slowed down considerably. "Wot, onteed horror, horror, faint, horror." Paying no attention to this, Banuk goes to his murdered huntsman. Laid to one side, eyes peer into the darkness ahead. Banuk, still knelt down beside Kemba, unable to come to terms with what he's done, starts to rise back to his feet. When thunder, lighting, thud, Banuk takes a blow to the head, falls down instantly to reveal the woot on his feet. White light exposes his delirious expression, and one of the pathway stones gripped between his hands. Down, but still alive, Banuk drags his half-motionless body towards the fire, which reflects in the trailing river of blood behind him. A momentary white light. Banuk stops to turn over, takes fast and jagged breaths, as another momentary light exposes the woot moving closer. Banuk meets the derangement in the woot's eyes, sees his hands raise the rock up high, before a final blow is delivered. Wot, thud. Stone meets skull. The soles of Banuk's jerking feet become still. Thunder's now dormant. The woot, truly possessed, gets up slowly, Neanderthals his way past the lifeless bodies of Kemba and Banuk. He now sinks down between the roots of the tree with the face. Blood and sweat glazed all over distinguish his tribal markings. From the side, the fire and momentary lightning expose his Neolithic features. The woot caresses the tree's roots on either side of him. Before, WOTONT'd, silent. The horror, fade out. Title, Asalai. So, that was the cold open to Asalai, the screenplay you just read. If you happen to wonder why this opening takes place in prehistoric times, well, here is why. What you just read was actually a dream sequence of Henry's. You see, once Henry was in the jungle, he claimed to have these very lucid dreams of the jungle's terrifying history, even as far back as prehistory. I know, pretty strange stuff. Make sure to tune in next week for the continuation of the story, where we'll be introduced to our main characters before they answer the call to adventure. Thanks for reading, everyone, and feel free to leave your thoughts and theories in the comments. Until next time, this is the OP logging off.